that humanity is at a time of reckoning, and a reckoning is a facing of oneself and all of one's creations, and that everything that's been created in fear needs to be reestablished, in a different way.
What's up, guys? Welcome back to Your Superior Self. Today, I'm with one of my favorite channels, one of my favorite human beings, Paul Selig. Paul, thank you for taking the time, my friend.
Thank you for having me. It's good to see you.
So this book that I just got done reading and highlighting and going through it and rehearsing for this interview, Resurrection. Where did you get the photo? Is this from Maui?
No, that's from the publisher's stock. I have no idea. But
I
it felt
saw
like
that.
Maui, which is
Yeah,
what I liked about it. Yeah.
I saw that and I was like, man, how fitting is that? Like now that you're
Mhm.
in Maui and I love Maui. That it was nice. It's a nice little photo. That's pretty cool. So since the last time I've spoken with you, we talked a little bit about Christ consciousness and what that means for me. Now I'm experiencing different activations energetically. And
Mhm.
I don't know if it's the upper room. Does the guides talk about that? Like when you start moving into I guess I call it God consciousness or God nature. Is that
Mhm.
the upper room?
I suppose you can call it that. I mean, yes, the guides say, we're living in a shared experience. They call it an octave with its high and low notes. And they say any piece of music, any song can be sung in a higher octave. And the upper room, as they describe it, is the octave above the one that they call the common field, or how we've known ourselves. And they're talking about, the process of transposition. The books are really all about how the human being, the energetic field, can be transposed to operate in a higher way. And that's what they call the upper room. And they do call that, Christ consciousness. And I suppose other things as well, but that's been my experience of it.
Hmm. Now you don't refer to yourself as a spiritual teacher
Mm-mm.
or a guru or anything like that, but you do experience them through these channels, and they must be bringing higher energy for you to help you evolve consciously as well, right?
Yeah, they are. But, I consider I mean, I'm a student of the work. I don't go back and reread the books. I forget probably two-thirds of what comes through me the moment it's done. In a lot of ways, I'm a radio. That's my job, is to show up for the transmission. And I'm a willing radio, and I think I'm a pretty accurate one, which means I'm present for this dictation, which is the guides delivering their books or their lectures, because there's no editing in the books. Maybe three words get altered because I misspoke them in any volume. But I don't, I've gotten to the point where I can interpret the teachings when people ask me about them. But my experience of the teachings is probably like yours. I'm working with it, I'm comprehending it, I'm catching myself when I'm choosing in fear. I'm remembering to work with the energetic attunements that support my maintaining a higher equilibrium or level of consciousness or vibration. I mean, I do the things that they instruct. So at that level, I guess I'm a student. I don't know that I'm the best student,
Mhm.
but I think it's, I used to say, the radio doesn't get to dance to the music. And for a long, long time, they told me my job was to hold the door open. And that was really frustrating for other people's growth. And then I realized, holding the door open was, the books were the doorway, the books were the door. And then finally, they said to me, after I think, it was the Book of Mastery, I think, or something. They say, you get to come across, you get to cross the threshold now too. And my life has been very, very different ever since then. So no, but I don't want to be a spiritual teacher. That's somebody else's work. I'm happy to show up for what I do as best I can.
Hmm. You also talk about the guides talk about we cannot serve or be ruled by two masters, right? The monad or the personality, but each will give you results.
Mhm.
What results? What results do we get from the monad?
Well, I think that there's an aspect of all of us. We can call it the monad. That's what the word, the term they used, or the indwelling Christ, or the true self, or the eternal self. They use these names, the divine spark. I suspect that there's probably a name for it in every system of spiritual development. And that's the aspect of us that knows, that truly knows. The personality self is basically, if I understand it correctly, it's a construct. There's nothing wrong with it. We need it. We incarnate it and we work with it as part of being here. But who we truly are expresses beyond that and actually knows itself, if I understand what the guides teach, beyond linearity, beyond duality, beyond the systems of inherited reality that we've chosen to learn through. The guides say the personality self knows itself through history. It doesn't have any other basis. My idea of who I am is dependent on many, many things, including how I was raised, where I was born, everything that you can think of, what my teachers said, what people said about me, all of those things, whereas the true self operates beyond that and consequently is free and is liberated from that structure.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know if I were to think about the rewards of the true self, that's nothing that I've ever really asked. The guys are saying it's being and knowing. It's how you be. It's how you know. It's not, I don't think this is about something that you get. It's probably why I'm never going to be channeling on cruise ships or something, and it's not about how to get, the better looking partner or the bigger house. I don't think it's that. I think those things are available and there's nothing wrong with that. But who they are, I think, is beyond, who we think we are. And in fact, the guides have said, we are who you become when you truly know who you are.
Sure.
They operate as the true self. So the reward is how you operate and how you be. I think that's it. For me, it comes with peace in a way that I had not experienced prior. And I'm living a life now that I didn't think I would or could ever live, truthfully. And I'm not saying I'm done or that I've arrived or I've ascended. There's still work ahead of me and I still have my stuff. But I seem to have a whole lot less of it than I used to. And that was the challenge, was moving through that, because it comes up as part of this work. You don't get to bypass your stuff in this teaching. You don't.
Sure.
I'd say the true self knows, and it knows, I suspect, what we need to address, and it comes up to be addressed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's I find myself falling into this old patterns and conditions where we have to do, right? Because until you start becoming more curious about this work and reading more literature and finding out, awakening slowly, you have no idea like what we are, what we can be. It's more or less like the old um, um, you know success model where you have to go out and be a certain person, you have to do a certain thing, and you have to earn a certain amount of money to be successful. And then when you start awakening to the monad, the Christ self, um, you start realizing that, well, for me anyway, it's like, but there's still a fear. There's still a fear that the personality holds on to, saying, well, you just can't be all the time because how are the bills going to be paid? How are you going to feed your children? Does that make sense?
Yeah, but I think, I went through this in a different way early on in my journey. I was an old 12 stepper. I got sober when I was 25, and I'm a lot older than that now. And for a period of time, I took, the third step in AA, made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood God, to mean I didn't have to do anything. It was all going to just show up, and I became somewhat passive. And that was my interpretation at a time. And I've learned since that it is about showing up, and it's about showing up for what's needed. And it's about doing the next right thing always. If you want to build a house, you need to know how to hammer a piece of wood, next to another one. You need to have a plan. I mean, there are things that require, preparation and thought. But I think how we attend to everything is a little bit different, or at least how I do, which is it's not based on outcome in the old system, who I'm supposed to be to fulfill some idea of who I think I am or who I want people to think I am, because I had to give up that a while ago, doing what I do,
Yeah. Well, I definitely feel a shift in my, like I was telling you before, in my energy. It's shifting me, and I don't know where it's shifting me, to be honest with you. Like I feel a shift happening, and I'm still in the process, the middle of the process for that. I can't tell you how long it's going to last. I don't know, but I feel like humanity is going through that as well. Like you see a lot of the chaos going on, and I think the energy shift is like bringing up a lot of that darkness that we kept pushing down over generations and generations, and now we're seeing it come to light. Where do the guides say that we're going next or headed next?
Well, they said in the very first book, which was dictated in 2009, that humanity is at a time of reckoning, and a reckoning is a facing of oneself and all of one's creations, and that everything that's been created in fear needs to be reestablished, in a different way. And they said in the Book of Truth, which was dictated, I don't know, 6 years ago or something, it was before Trump was elected. It was, right in that period, they say, what's about to happen is going to shake everything up. And they said, in truth, a lie will not be held. And finally, we're moving into a period collectively where what we've ignored and buried and refused is going to be seen. And they said, imagine that your life is like an excavation site, and, things that were buried 5 weeks ago and 5,000 years ago are all coming up. And that's, I think, kind of what we saw and what we've experienced. What I hear is that humanity has chosen to make it. We're going to survive. And part of what we're seeing now is what it means to do that, which means we can't go on the way that we've been going. They said in one of the early books that, we build bombs in the belief that it's going to make us safe, which is the most ridiculous thing they'd ever heard. They said, eventually they're going to go off if you keep going as you have been. And what they've said is that humanity made a choice to move forward. And they said it's going to take about 4 generations for this to establish itself. But that's the road that we're on. So it's positive, and we get to ride this wave of great change forward. And they talk about it as great change, and that's what we're in. And I don't get that it's necessarily going to be comfortable or needs to be. Growth generally isn't. I agree with what you said about the individual going through a process and the collective going through the same process. I think that's exactly what's happening.
Mm-hmm. Do they give any like hints to what in 4 generations it might look like?
I don't know. They probably do, and I probably don't remember them. I think the book that they just finished dictating came so fast, I don't recall much of it. But I understand that the idea of divisions as we've chosen them, this belief in separation, has to be addressed. And they said that everything that we see in our own experience here is experienced through the lens of separation, that we're separate from other people and that we're separate from source. And that our whole idea of who we are and memory itself needs to be reclaimed in a higher way, so that we stop replicating that, because all we can do is what we've known, which is war, essentially. So I can ask them what it's going to look like. I wasn't, planning on channeling here, but they're saying the idea of who you are is altered when this occurs. And when this occurs, the challenges that you meet are met in a very different light. You don't antagonize what you don't like. You understand it. You understand it. What needs to be transformed can and will be, can and will be. You will choose the higher option. You will choose the higher option because you're not operating from a base of fear, because you're not operating from a basis of fear. fear. The action of fear is to claim more fear. That's what you have known. That's what you have known, and that's what will be altered. And they're saying, and that is what will be altered.
Well, I appreciate that. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Um, they talk about love a lot in the book, right?
Uh,
What is your definition of love? Like,
I
I've
don't
always
really have one,
no.
I don't really have one. I mean, they talk about it, God as love, or love is a way that God is realized and known. I understand that. I do believe that love is not an emotion. You can feel many things, but I understand love as a tone, a vibrational tone, that's sung through us. I mean, other people have said this, and my guides have said it as well. It's not we who love, it's God, or whatever you want to call God, that loves through us.
Mhm,
And that's really the experience of God that people can have, usually, in a lifetime.
mhm. Have you ever experienced that, like vibration, like when you're channeling them and maybe you get to the upper room? Have you ever
Yeah,
felt that type of love vibration?
yeah, I have.
Where do you feel it most? Do you feel it in the heart center?
There's a thing that the guides do when they work through me. Often they lecture, and then if in a workshop where there's not too many people, sometimes they'll work with me in a very direct way, and they'll step more fully into my field, and they'll stand in front of every person that's there and attune them. And for me, it is at the heart, but it's also a full experience of almost being. It's not like you're being absorbed. It's like you're in a current that is operative and is conscious, and it is love. And the guides use me, and they look through my eyes when they look at everybody. And I don't, I'm in some ways a worried man and still, a bit timid and shy and all those things. The guides are not. And when they do this, I've been told, hundreds of times at this point, that my eyes change color when they're working this way. They turn bright, bright, pale blue, and I have hazel eyes. But the experience is love. There's no judgment. There's no history. There's no idea of beauty as we utilize it. Everybody's just gorgeous. I mean, just from the inside out, just gorgeous. I mean, it's an amazing thing to feel,
Mm,
and people feel it because many people have never been seen that way, and
mm,
for them, it can be devastating. People have big experiences with that, and so I've experienced it through the guides that way, when they're working. And when they're working at that level, I'm just very out of the way. So I get to be the conduit. But I've often said, I'm a conscious channel. I'm present for stuff. But it's kind of like, what I do is I turn the wheel of the car over to them and I climb into the back seat. So I'm aware in a receded fashion. And if there's stuff going on that I don't understand or I'm confused by that they're speaking about, I'll interrupt. It's like I lean into the front seat and they'll say, Paul has a question. And most of the time they'll take it, not always. So even my experience of witnessing people and the way that the guides do is from this place of being receded and allowing this higher awareness to be present through me.
mm. How does it make you feel, Paul, as the channel, right? That you've created this platform almost with these books, these series, like to help other people, individuals. I know you don't want to, identify yourself as a guru or a teacher, but like, how does it make you feel, Paul, as a person, as an individual, as a personality, that you've been able to do this?
I was a college teacher for 25 years. I taught at NYU and I ran a graduate program at another college for 18 of those years. And I loved teaching. It's what I did. And I was grateful for the teaching, and teaching was my spiritual practice, really, because it certainly wasn't paying me much, to be an academic, but it's what I did. And I don't feel that much different about what I do now than when I felt like, wow, that was a really good class. For me, I feel successful when the teaching is fluid, coming through me, when I'm not. Sometimes, once in a while, it can be herky-jerky, and I'm going, why is this herky-jerky today? Am I in resistance? Is there resistance in the room? What's cooking? So I have the experience of the work as it comes through, and I'm grateful that people are helped. I work in two ways. When I work as a channel, I'm just taking dictation. That's it. There's no real interpretation required. So with the channeling, I have the experience of this was fluid. The energy was enormous. I could feel it. The people in the audience can feel it. It's palpable. It's real. And that's important to me because I'm really not interested in people giving me, Paul, their authority. I don't want it. Other people want that stuff. I don't really want it. I've got enough difficulty without those projections. When I work psychically, it's a whole different thing because psychic work for me is interpretive. And I have this odd thing, sort of being a radio. When I'm working with my guides, that's the radio station I'm plugged into. If I'm reading you, I'm tuned into you. You're the station I'm listening to, and I may be hearing you at a higher level. If you want to know what's going on in your marriage, I can tune into your spouse and hear her or the kids or the boss or whatever. And that's what I do. And that stuff I like because it's work that's verifiable. You know, I've never met your boss. I don't know what he looks like, but I start to look like him when I do this. That's sort of how that works. And I like the psychic work because it verifies the channeled work for me. You know, there are two different stations that I can play, and one supports the other. I'm grateful for the life that I have now, but I have to say, I didn't plan any of this. You know, I didn't plan to channel any books. I didn't know about the first book until 2 days before it was dictated. The guide said, we have a book to write. It's going to take 2 weeks. You know, and I was like, okay, why not? And that's been now, there are 10 in print. The 11th was just finished. So it's all been the same. No planning. I'm just grateful that I get to show up for this stuff and that people are helped by it.
Would you ever write a book about your psychic abilities and like what that looks like?
Yeah, I think I'm going to. I actually agreed to do that for the publisher who's done the channel work. And I wanted to do it. You know, I had been a writer when I was young, and I had the worst writer's block of anybody I've ever known in my life. And it was humiliating, and I was teaching writing. It was just pain. And the irony is that none of the books take more than 2 months of sittings. And, you know, the first book was done in 2.5 weeks. I took 2 days off, otherwise it would have been 2 weeks. And, you know, there's no editing. So it's a whole different thing. The irony is these are fluid and easy. And I don't know what it's going to be like to do my own writing again. I'm excited at the prospect, but it's not to tell people what it is. It's about the experience of coming to this place, which was in some ways extraordinarily challenging, not at all graceful. I'm not a good New Ager. I never have been. I mean, this was like getting dropped on my head, all this stuff, and not comfortable, you know. Now it's comfortable, but I seem to have stopped needing to care so much what people think about all this. You know, it's just what it is. It's really a part of my life, and I have a good community that supports me. You know, they're not students of my work. They're actually, you know, Ram Dass's satsang, which is they're my neighbors, you know. So I'm just grateful that I have people around who have spiritual life that I respect and are loving.
Sure.
But that's my life now, and this is just part of it. So I don't think about it a lot. I really don't. It doesn't occur to me to tune into anybody psychically unless they ask me. Unless I'm getting stood up in a restaurant, then I'm going to say, are they late or am I getting stood up? Then I might ask, but otherwise I don't. It doesn't even occur to me to do it.
So what's the last thing that you've written on your own, like your own piece?
The last thing I wrote on my own probably was an introduction to one of the books. When I taught graduate school, I used to have to write commencement speeches, you know, and deliver people off to their lives, and I enjoyed doing that. Um, at the end of my own writing career, I was working, it was very interesting, kind of as a hired gun and ghostwriter, for projects that needed fixing.
Hmm.
And that was really interesting because I think the point of that in terms of my development was learning what it was like to get out of the way and let it not matter if my name was on it. It was humbling. And it wasn't what I ever wanted, but it was work. So, and this is a whole other thing. I mean, the channeling the books is not writing. There's no writing at all. It's all spoken. The books
Hmm.
are spoken and the recordings, the videos are sent off to a transcription service, and then somebody proofreads them against the recordings again. And that's what makes it to the publisher. There's no writing. So
Would you have to get up like early in the morning if you were to start writing your own book? Would you have to start getting
probably,
up and start putting in practices and getting back
probably,
into the
yeah.
game?
And I may just be so ready to do this again and so hungry. I channeling is a craft in some ways. There's a skill set that's involved that has been honed from showing up for it again and again and again, and often when I didn't want to, because there are many times I've done this when the last thing I want to do is channel. So I have good experience with this, which has made me, I think, a more fine-tuned vehicle for the work that comes through me. And I think I'm grateful for that because I didn't start off channeling and lecture. I started off hearing fragments,
Mhm.
when I was working with energy healing and I would hear things for other people, or I'd be told to receive coordinates for working with energy, which was just like, what the hell is this? So I don't know. I think, though, that I've missed my own creative expression. And this is an opportunity for that. And I'm looking forward to it. And I think I have a story to tell. I don't know that it's the story people want to hear. I don't know if it's the yippee, how lovely it is to channel. I think it might be, this is what it's like when you're bottoming out in a hotel room at the Gopher Campus Motor Lodge in St. Paul and the Gideons leave a Bible in the drawer and then you start hearing voices. It's like, what the hell? It was nuts. And I'm the first one to say this was pretty nuts how this all happened, especially to some atheistic
Mhm.
gay punk in New York, in the middle of the AIDS epidemic. It was nuts
Mhm.
to go on this journey and so unexpected. Nobody expected this, and I never expected this. And in some ways, I look back and it all makes perfect sense. And other times I go, what the hell was this? What the hell happened? I'm glad that it happened and I'm glad that it continues to happen, but I may never fully understand this phenomenon.
Sure. I don't know if like we can. I don't know if we have the capacity and like our awareness to understand it, right? Because of the personality and the ego and just being conscious. I think it is a phenomena that we look to try to to validate. Scientists for
Yeah.
years have been trying to validate this stuff or prove it wrong.
Or prove it
Um,
wrong. Yeah, I agree. You know,
um, what I've always, like to your point, right? People think of channels like yourself or some others of like having like, happy channeling days and, writing these books and living a certain life. But what is a bad day for Paul Selig?
a bad day for Paul Selig.
Yeah.
There's plenty of them. It's when I sort of go into my OCD and I worry. It's when I revert to behaviors that don't support me, whether that's complaining about everything or eating or whatever. I've been addicted to just about anything you can be addicted to. I was a 4 pack a day smoker until I was 48 or something like that. The lecturing started when I stopped. That was the amazing thing. The guy said, we want to keep working with you, but you need to address this. And I actually stopped the next day, which was, nobody thought
Wow.
would happen. Yeah. And that's when they began lecturing. And the books were started to come, within a year of that. But I have really good days. I mean, I live in the rainforest. I don't even know how to drive yet. I'm learning. I failed my driver's test so badly here that they're not going to let me take it for another month. The woman said, I'm not even letting you on the highway.
What'd you
I don't
do?
know.
What'd you do? What'd
What
you
I
do?
did was I was learning to drive barefoot here. All my lessons were barefoot, but you have to wear shoes in the damn lesson. And I had these orthopedic Coca Bundy sneakers with these platform soles, and I couldn't assess the weight on the pedals. That's what I did wrong. That's what I did wrong. And I learned. I bought some moccasins. We'll see next time. Maybe I'll do better.
I mean, that
But
doesn't seem that major, right? I'm like you
it was
didn't hit
bad. Just let me
anybody.
just tell you, it's no, I didn't hit any. Was all I didn't do was hit anybody. But I massacred the cones and the parallel. I really didn't know how to parallel park. It's the one thing I didn't learn. Everything else I was okay. The parallel parking was a train wreck,
Yeah.
and the pedals, yeah, I didn't do too well. So,
What was that conversation like at the very end with the instructor? Like, sorry, Mr. Sugg, this is not going to work out.
well, she didn't do it with me in the car. She did it with me once she was behind her plexiglass window again, when they tell you what you did wrong. And I had my good friend Brent, who had to drive. You have to bring in a grown up driver. It's usually the 16-year-old with their parent. I had my buddy, who's 10 years younger than me, who was sitting there, and she just said, Mr. Selig, you can't drive. Basically, what it was. Anyway, and I was generally mortified and depressed for about 3 days after. I didn't expect I'd pass at the first try, but I thought I would do better than I did. But I gotta say, I knew not to go in that day, and I knew not to wear those stupid shoes, but I did.
I'm just glad it wasn't a stick shift or something like that. That would have been like added distraction and pressure there.
Probably.
I mean, where do you practice at? Where do you practice driving?
Practice driving
Yeah.
here. I mean, I have a teacher.
Yeah.
I haven't seen him for a bit. He travels a lot. And I have friends that'll, get in the car with me and let me drive to Costco, which is the big event here on Maui. You got to go to Costco. So I drive with friends and I drive with the teacher and I drive a lot when I'm in the
Yeah.
car.
Yeah.
Highways, back roads, parking lots. I just can't
Mhm.
parallel park. I'll leave it at that.
Oh man. I don't know, but you're a New York guy, so it's like,
I'm a New York guy.
you
I
didn't
didn't
even
need a
drive.
car.
Yeah.
No,
How was that trip going back east? I mean, how was that to come back into the city?
I've been back once. It was actually very good. I left New York. I mean, I didn't leave New York intentionally. I was working in Costa Rica when New York shut down due to COVID, and I wasn't able to go back. And I didn't know where to go. And for my friend, the same friend who took me driving, said, "You come to Maui," and found me a little tiny house to live in. And I thought I'd be there for a month until things cleared up in New York, and I ended up not leaving. And after 10 months, I knew I was home and I got a house, which I'd never owned anything in my life. I've been a
Mm.
New York renter. So going back to New York was really interesting and I enjoyed it. I enjoyed seeing people. The city looked good. I was there in the fall. It was quite beautiful. Um, and I didn't need to be there anymore. And I knew that too. I didn't need it anymore.
Was that closure for you at all?
Probably,
Yeah.
probably, yeah.
Mm. Did you do any channeling over there?
No, I don't think I did. I I believe yeah, I was, well, actually I did because I was channeling at the Omega Institute in Rhinebeck, and that's the reason I was in New York. And it was right before they started the newest book. They were prepping for it there. And so I went upstate first, and then I went to New York. I saw my aging mother and my brother, and I have a new niece, who's very beautiful. I hadn't met her yet.
Hmm.
And I had my family time, and I came back. But the channeling in New York was great, actually. But I didn't do anything in the city, and I don't know when I will, you know.
Mhm. Interesting. With the family dynamic, right? Like, do they, I mean, I don't know, right? Because I don't know your family, but do they support channeling? Do they understand it? Do they accept it? I mean, I feel like I'm the oddball in my family anyway, right?
Yeah.
Especially with my consciousness research and me,
Hmm.
my spirituality work. Do
Yeah.
they accept the channeling part of like, do they look at it kind of like, that's just another side of him that we don't talk about, or what?
So a bit more like that. I'm the very first book, maybe it was the second book. There was a second book, I think it was. There was a book signing at a Barnes and Noble in New York, and my mother came and sat in the first row, and she listened to me talk, and I read a little bit of the book, and I watched her because I was very aware of her being there, and she just looked sad in the first row, like she didn't know who I was or she'd missed something. And in fact, she did. You know, when I went on a spiritual path when I was 25, I wasn't really supported in that. And I studied energy healing, and nobody really was interested in that. So it was what I did, and it was part of my private life. But truthfully, because I was working in academia, you know, at least at NYU, it wasn't something that I talked about. You know, I had a group that met in my apartment once a week where I would do this stuff. And that group met for 18 years. People would put like $10 in a basket at the end of the night. I'd buy a pizza or something at the end. You know, that's what I would do. My younger brother, I believe, has read the books, and I think he's very interested in it. And I think this whole phenomena forced him to reframe who I was because I had been kind of somebody else to him and had been sort of the family scapegoat. So I wasn't, and we weren't raised with anything remotely resembling religion. So this was all very foreign. And he's been supportive of it. And she's been supportive of my work as well. It's just my mother and my brother left. And although she can't read the books, and she really says she has a very hard time with it because the guides talk about forgiveness, and she has a very, very hard time forgiving anybody for anything.
Mhm.
And she's honest about that, and she's a very unhappy human being. And, you know, that's what her life is. And she's, you know, learning through whatever her experiences are, just as you and I are. Can't judge it, you know, and it doesn't bother me that she doesn't read the books. I give books to people and I say, you don't have to read it. They're not page turners. You know, you've got to really want to invest in it.
Sure. I had what was it? I had Alan Steinfeld on the show.
Yeah.
A buddy of yours from the early days.
Yeah.
I think I can't remember what the if it's over there or not, but it's somewhere. I have it around here in the office. But it talks about UFOs. Do the guides
Yeah.
ever talk about ETs at all?
No, I mean, they don't disqualify it. They say, I hear it's real, but
Hmm.
that's not their subject, you
Sure.
know? So, you know, I think other people can go there and do, and that's fine. The guides' work seems fairly singular, you know, and all of the books are building on the prior one. That's been my experience. Will they get into that kind of stuff? It's quite possible. There are lots of things I kind of wish they would talk about, but I show up for their books, the books that they want to write, not necessarily the book that I want to hear.
But what else would you want to hear? Like what is it?
I don't know. It's funny. Um, I am resistant to them, to the guides, when they channel about history and the evolution of, you know, the teaching that they're bringing through me, which they say has been here for a very, very long time. And I'm resistant. I'm resistant when they talk about science and medicine, but they've begun doing that more and more. And I don't know where they'll go with this. There's one more book left in the trilogy, and I have no idea. You know, I probably won't begin those sittings until, you know, late summer. It's
Hmm.
usually August, September is when I probably will be channeling, I assume. Um, I mean, I wish they'd talk more about sex. I wish they'd talk more about the things that we collectively get confused about. But I suspect they do. They talk a lot about how we treat each other and how we stand in the way and basically how we deny what they call the inherent divine in everything,
Mhm.
but they do say again and again that we're operating from a very, very faulty system. And it's a system that has been born in this idea that we're separate from source, and we're not. And so when they began working in the most recent book with memory, I was like, this is just getting too nuts for me, reclaiming memory. And that's not to say you pretend things don't happen. It's about re-seeing what was without the faulty lens of separation. It's
Remembering that. Mhm.
yeah,
It's I had a meditation not too long ago that I really thought about you afterwards because it was like I had this download of like there is just one note, right, in the
yeah,
universe, and we're all different keys of that note, and we're all just trying to get back to that one note. And like every life that whether your experience is good or bad, whatever that may look or how you identify that, like that either aligns more with the key or the one note, or you line
mm-hmm,
away from it. And that's
mm-hmm,
what karma is. It's not like karma is this thing, oh well, you've done bad things. It's no, it's like,
mm-hmm,
what is your vibration? Like you come into this life and you do certain things, it messes with your vibration. And
mm-hmm,
the main goal, like obviously, is to get back in line with the one note. And when you do that, that's when you
mm-hmm,
kind of become source again.
mm-hmm.
And I just thought it
So,
was fascinating because it was
yeah,
like, it just made sense, because people get, how New Age is, right? Like there's just so many different
yeah,
philosophies about it and perspectives, and karma is this, and karma is that. And
yeah.
it was very simple. It was like, there's one note in the universe. It's the
Mm-hmm.
creator of everything. And in order to get back in line with it, you have to align with its frequency.
Yeah, that's what they say. They call it the Word. That was the very first book called I'm the Word. And they call it the One Note Song, And they say that everything that we see and experience is of that one note, but at varying levels of tone. Everything has to be of that source because nothing can be outside of it. But I do understand that we can be aligned to it or not.
Mhm.
And we have will, so it's got to be choice. We have to choose.
What do you think, right? When you step into the upper room and you start having more of this Christ consciousness, and we align more with that, are we God? Are we just aspects of that, right?
Yeah, I get aspects.
Yeah.
There's a challenge, I think, with a lot of spiritual teachings, whereas people want to deify the personality structure. It's like I am God and here's my crown. When I was in my probably early 30s and struggling, and I always say I'm 99% sure I heard this in channel because I was just opening up and I wrote it down because I didn't understand it and stuck it in a book. So I'm pretty sure I just heard it. But what I heard was freedom comes when the throne relinquishes its king. And I went, what the hell is that? And I think it's basically the essence of the entire teaching. Who sits in the throne? See, the small self, they say, lives in a small kingdom. And my small self, it's like the Red Queen and Alice in Wonderland, off with their heads. I just want what I want when I want it. But the true self, I think, when the high self or the eternal self or the monad is present, not something the personality self isn't operative, it's just not running everything. It moves into its rightful place.
Hmm.
It helps to know what your name is, what your address is, and if you like black coffee or light tea, it's entirely up to you.
Hmm. Who are you going to get to write your introduction for your book? Your book.
My book,
Yeah.
I don't know if anybody will want to for that. Who knows what that's going to be? Not all of the books have had introductions. Some of them have. Victoria Nelson, who was on the phone for the first three books, I think, wrote the first introduction. And Jeffrey Kripal, who was running, he may still run the religious studies program at Rice University. He's a scholar on Gnosticism, wrote the introduction to another. Aubrey Marcus wrote one.
Yeah.
And Mitch Horowitz wrote one for one of the early books. He was one of the first publishers. And my own story, I don't know who should write that one. Somebody who doesn't take me too seriously, I hope.
Your driver's ed teacher.
Oh man. I'm really for, I have very kind friends. I'm sure somebody, and some of them are writers, somebody would be willing to write the introduction. I don't even know if it's going to be a good book. I know my publisher is hoping for something where there's a spiritual lesson at the end of every chapter. And I don't know that I can write that kind of book, but I can talk about what it was like and what it is like.
Do you think, like, when you're writing that book, do you think the guides will try to sneak in and put a lesson in there?
Not that way. They might. I hope they support me in the writing of this. I really do. And I have and can move into inspiration. And I think inspiration is somewhat different than channeling. And I'm kind of a bit of a fundamentalist about this. People don't always agree. But to me, channeling is straight dictation. It's stenography, really. It's what it is. Whereas inspiration, it's divinely given. It's high inspiration, but you still get to craft it. You know what I mean? You get to go back and fix it and rearrange a sentence. And I don't have that luxury with the channel books, even if I don't necessarily like or agree or understand with what's been said.
Can you psychically, just because Lily was walking by, can you connect with her psychically?
I don't. I mean, we're so connected. I don't know that I could, because we're sort of like extensions of each other. I don't. I'm not a. I don't talk to dead people. I can. And people often ask me to tune into their animals, and I can, but it's just because animals, for the most part, don't communicate in language. It's a visual thing, or it's kinesthetic. So I can't tell you. I tune into all these people's. What's wrong with my dog? And I tune into the dog, and I feel it. They've got an impacted butt. I mean, that's the problem. I go, you got to clean out your dog. She's impacted. So that's the kind of stuff. But animals are kind of great because they're not trying to be anything other than they are. They're just being, and that's the nice thing, whereas if you tune into, people ask me to read for their infants, their kids, the little ones, and they all come through like old Jewish diamond merchants, the little ones, like, oy vey, how did I get here? Oh no, look who these people are. Get me out of here. It's very, very funny. They're like old people when they show up. And then they lose language, and then I get baby talk for a while. But when they first come through, they're quite funny.
That's awesome. Paul, man, I love these conversations, man. I just love being able to be with you. You know what I mean? Like just hanging out, just connecting with you and, just being. Thank you, man.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I enjoyed them too.